Welcome to the 531, where we debate a top 5 list on a particular subject, further discuss it down to a top 3, and then eventually settle on a top 1. Now, after this beat, we'll get to today's subject. Welcome back, fans, for another week of the 531, where we take our top 5 list on a particular subject, vote it down to a top 3, and then debate that down to a number 1 spot. And this week, we have a very interesting topic. Dave, we're doing the top 5 charismatic wrestlers.
Charismatic, baby. Who can talk, who can get to the field stuff. It doesn't have to be talk necessarily, right? It can be like how they perform in the ring, the way they look, but they just ooze charisma. An example I gave to this to people was when we did our top 5 interviews, as good as The Rock is, he didn't quite make my top 5 interviews. But I'm charismatic, spoiler alert, The Rock will be on my list.
Nice. And Jesse from New Hampshire brings us our first list. He's got Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, John Cena, Shawn Michaels, and Ric Flair.
Yeah, no denying that. I mean, all those guys are top performers. I have a lot of the lists this week, so I will tell you that surprisingly, Cena doesn't make a lot of people's lists.
No, and he's not necessarily somebody I would have thought about, but I also didn't watch a lot during the Cena years where he got big. I mean, there's no denying what Hogan can do. I mean, we lived through Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, and Ric Flair just seems to be charismatic his whole career, my whole lifetime that I remember at least.
Say what you will about Ric Flair, but I mean, that's a guy to me that transcends a little bit. I mean, you're talking about rappers, professional athletes, football players who walk around the locker room on stage going, kiss feeling, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying. Woo! I mean, come on, the guy's like 70-something years old and people are still imitating him. Transcend. Big deal.
Huge. Now, I'm going to bring you my second list, the last list that I have. I've got Ric Flair. I've got Shawn Michaels. I got Brian Pillman.
Good.
I got Eli Drake, and I have The Rock.
Very good. Eli Drake, huh? Yeah, that's not bad. He's one that might not make the list because he's not like in that legendary status, but like he's a very charismatic guy.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like the most charismatic people in wrestling, and I feel like he's got to make a modern run for that. Especially everything he's done from what we've seen from him in Impact, especially NWA, and just going forward.
I mean, one thing about NWA is the way it's set up with the studio, you kind of have to be a good talker. You can't fluff that in, or phone that in. You got to be able to have the chops. We've seen. He does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. All right. So, since I have all the other lists, I'll run the marathon here. Let's start off with Jake St. John, author, friend of the show. He's got The Rock, Dusty Rhodes, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Ric Flair, and as he put it, he almost put down Gorgeous George, not Macho Man Randy Savage's girlfriend, but Gorgeous George. But then he decided with, in his words, Rowdy fucking Piper. I went back and I watched a bunch of Piper stuff earlier this week where he made a babyface turn in Georgia Championship Wrestling. So good. Like Piper and his early WWF stuff and before is just legendary.
I'm really sad I didn't include Piper or Rhodes on my list. I feel like those are two legendary names that when you're talking charisma in wrestling, they're almost like on the Mount Washington, I would think, right up there with Flair.
Yeah, no shit. They're definitely there. I think we're going to see Dusty a few more times. In fact, we'll go to AJ's list. Here's a name you're not going to see a lot, but he definitely deserves it.
Luthez?
Dog. What's that?
I was going to say Luthez or Hackenschmidt.
Fucking Luthez, yeah. Bernd Gagne, no. AJ Swain through.
I just had to hit the cough button.
AJ straight through.
Oh my God. I had to hit the cough button there, but I had to. You popped me huge on that.
Anyway, back to reality. As Shawn Michaels said after his match with Hulk Hogan, Junkyard Dog, JYD, who could definitely get the crowd going with just a look. Superstar Billy Graham, Dusty Rhodes, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and The Rock. You know, like I said, JYD, someone to look out for. And surprisingly, you're going to see him on a few upcoming lists. A lot of our fans, very smart. Superstar Billy Graham makes this list a few times.
Wow, I was surprised. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of surprised to hear Junkyard Dog. I mean, for what he did in the Mid-South area, he was out of hand. And I mean, he got over when he was in the WWE, but that's not a list that it sounds like AJ threw together at the last second or looked up on us. It's a really solid list, and it's kind of what I would figure for like his wheelhouse of being a little older than us.
Well, you know, me and him actually for this particular list, he was helping around my house. I mentioned this, but he might have put a little more thought into this one. So, hats off. I guess that's an underhanded, backhanded way of saying, AJ, you did a good job this week, pal. Let's bring it on with one of our big supporters, Zach St. John, brother of Jake from Griswold. And he's got also superstar Billy Graham. Says he's been watching a lot of Billy Graham stuff lately. He's a big fan. Heartbreak Kid. He's got Ric Flair, The Rock, and what you gonna do, Hulk Hogan. I mean, we're gonna see some of these names multiple times. You know, there's no denying the charisma of Hulk Hogan. I mean, the guy with the pose and everything, he oozes charisma. There's no doubt.
Exactly, and I mean, he's a garbage-ass wrestler if you go back and watch his matches, but there is a reason that a lot of people around our age have such a fandom of Hogan, even after the sex tape and what he said about black people.
Yeah. We didn't say he was a stand-up person in his life. We found out some things.
No, but he's got the charisma to kind of live through those tragedies, and that's something in itself.
He does. And, you know...
God damn, the motherfucking ice cream truck again. It's
shit.
Fucking full!
Shut it down. All right.
God, that motherfucker's going to be back around in 10 minutes, so get ready for it.
I'm going to move on to another list. You can't stop us. We continue to roll. We got Scott from Voluntown, friend of the show. He's got Ric Flair, Eddie Guerrero,
wow,
The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and this is how he wrote it to me. Captain Chris, I'm just kidding, Dusty Rhodes. So, no offense, Kristen, you didn't quite make the list. However, hats off to Scott for mentioning Eddie Guerrero. I don't know, I don't know what my top 5 is. Eddie's not on it. But, boy, Eddie's a charismatic guy, and I'm glad Scott mentioned him. I'm glad somebody mentioned him because he deserves to be mentioned.
Exactly, and it was that kind of charisma that I think helped him in WWE overcome the bias they have to size.
He saw Michaels and Brett a little bit, but I know Bruce Pritchard tells the story where he's like, Vince first sees him, and he's like, he's tiny. Look how tiny he is. And Bruce actually says, that's the next Mexican Shawn Michaels right there, though. And, Vince has said, if you watch the Eddie Guerrero DVD documentary, when they thought about giving Eddie like a second, third chance, there's not a lot of people they would do that for, but Eddie was special. So
That's
I think
true.
That says a lot.
I didn't even think about him living through those drug problems at the WWE and how much that charisma probably helped him keep a job and get other chances.
No, there's no doubt. And he really flourished in WWE. As much as we criticize people like now for WWE dropping the ball, it was Eddie who had great matches in WCW, but when he got to WWE, his personality really just shined through. The whole Latino heat, the live heat feel. Just so good, so good.
And he also kind of seemed to avoid some of the pitfalls of WWE's racist portrayal of certain foreigners.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to give me in the middle here a little bit. I got Dusty Rhodes, The Rock, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. I didn't mix it up much. Those are the guys I think are most charismatic. At the end of the day, to me, Dusty and The Rock are really two of the guys I had to sweat the top two here. I mean, Dusty to me just could hold a room like no other. The Hard Times promo, need to say more. And The Rock, the guy is like the biggest name in Hollywood right now. People know how charismatic this guy was. So that's where I land on those guys.
Yeah, Dusty is huge, and I don't even know what else to say about him. He's kind of right up there with Flair, with somebody that's given good interviews our whole life. And I mean, even in like the later years when he might have been rehashing some things for the third or fourth time in a promo, like say maybe ECW or even MLW, he was still compelling. So he's one of those guys that could almost give you the same act year after year, and you still enjoyed him nonetheless.
He knew how to say it, and he knew when to say it, more importantly.
Very true.
I'm going to move on here. We got Tim Hartford. Tim actually gave us a Jake St. John treatment and gave us a few honorable mentions. Chris Jericho, Goldust, Booker T, and Diamond Dallas Page. I'll tell you about DDP. That's the guy I think who learned charisma even more so later in his career. When you look at his Hall of Fame speech and how he talks now, this guy just became super, super good on the mic. He always was, but he got even better as time went on.
Do you think that's helped him launch the DDPY, or do you think that's just his natural push?
I think that's naturally how he is, but I think it definitely helped get his brand out there. The fact that he's become such a good talker, and the fact that he 100% immerses himself in whatever he does. You know, he's the general line article, and for everything we've heard, he's kind of that character. That's who he is, like 24/7.
And he's a charismatic person, but it almost seems like he's also like a virtuistic person, not necessarily somebody that might be all charisma. Because if you look at what he did for his friends Scott Hall and Jake the Snake, that's huge, and that's a different level of good guy.
100%. Now, the rest of Tim Hartford's actual list is HBK, Ric Flair, Superstar Billy Graham, Dusty Rhodes, and The Rock. And draw a little connection here. DDP, he credits so much of what he does because of Dusty Rhodes, too.
Wow, and Tim Storm, former guest on the show, also had Dusty as a huge influence on him.
Absolutely. All right, let's wrap up with the final two. Mike Flynn gave us The Rock, Ric Flair, Steve Austin, and as he put it, unfortunately, Hulk Hogan and Chris Jericho. So that's Mike Flynn, who's obviously not a Hogan fan, but after the begrudgingly at the end of the day, go, you know what? Fucking guy's charismatic. We got to give it to him anyway. Yeah,
I mean, it's like what I was saying before. As I've grown up, I've kind of lost my fandom for Hulk Hogan a little bit, because you realize he's not the greatest wrestler as far as in-ring work, but he can tell a story in the ring. He's just like the archetypal wrestler. He did a lot of damage with that, not only that sex tape, but just those statements.
But I got one for you here. Two guys speaking on this, Hogan and Rock. That WrestleMania match, and how important it is that they're so charismatic, and what we learn now, especially in the COVID area, what they did with that crowd. You watch that match silent, not the best match in the world, but because they took the crowd on an emotional roller coaster, it's one of the big WrestleMania moments that people never forget, and that's because of how charismatic those two are, and they knew how to lead a crowd.
Yeah, and that's why, there's no denying Hogan's charisma and, his place in wrestling.
Absolutely not. And we're going to give the main event status this week to Randy Oscar from Voluntown, because you know what? We always bust this kid's chop, so he's getting main event this week. And Randy
wait. So not only does he get us to try and book Amber Nova, which we're working on, Randy. Put on your seatbelt, bud. But we're giving him main event status?
I gave him a main event status this week.
All right, man. He hasn't even signed up for the Patreon, but that's fine.
We'll put some content on that Patreon for up to drink, kid.
Yeah, I was gonna say we haven't put any fucking content on there, so don't anybody go throwing their money at us yet.
Yeah, we don't want your money yet. But Randy, he gave us The Rock, Ric Flair, Chris Jericho. Here's one that's a little different: Jeff Hardy and Rowdy Piper. Now, I'll say this about Jeff Hardy. Out of the two Hardy brothers, back in the day, Jeff was the one that everybody pegged to be the star. Jeff was the one they put the world title on. Jeff was the one where Jim Ross had to call, climb the ladder, kid, make yourself famous. He was the one that looked a little different. Matt was kind of in the shadow. Now, here we are years later. Matt did a lot of delete stuff and broken stuff. And I think Matt's kind of become more the two that shines personality-wise.
If you had to compare Jeff Hardy at his height creatively in whatever federation versus Matt Hardy, let's just say his height creatively is the Broken Universe, because
Sure.
I mean, I feel that's where he really reached a different level. Who would you give it to? Do you think the little bit of time that Matt Hardy's done the Broken thing can equal what his brother's done for like so long and being that kind of artistic output? Isn't he the charismatic enigma, if I'm not wrong?
He is, but here's the thing. At the end of the day, it's preference, it's taste, right? So for my personal taste, Jeff did have the bigger platform, extended. More people probably know. However, to me, Matt personally was better. He's a better talker of the two. And I think there's a bigger presence now with Matt. If you look at it from this standpoint too, right? Jeff got over with the machine behind him because they saw something in him. Matt went down to Impact and Ring of Honor and the Independent, and then showed up to a WWE when he went back to WrestleMania. And all these fans are chanting, delete, delete, delete.
True, but when he was in Impact, he did kind of build that with his brother. So it's almost... That's where it makes it tough. Who's the more creative? Because I feel like Jeff's got like that heavier artistic side, but Matt can just make it. Matt can keep it on the road easier, keep it in between the lines, so to speak.
Well, I'll tell you what. That's a tough one. That's another debate down the road. Maybe me and AJ will tackle that.
Oh God, yeah, that would be an awesome topic. I mean, we know how you feel about the Bulldog wrestling on crack, so I feel like you're already coming out for Jeff Hardy.
You know what? The kid did it. All right. Hey, let's not underestimate Matt though. Matt did some drugs back in the day. Matt, I respect you, bro. I saw some of the stuff you did.
Yeah, wasn't there like a WWE documentary where he's like falling asleep at the table?
Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of shit with Matt and Joe. All right. However, this is not about who was the best drug addict this week. This is about who's got the most charisma. Joe, smoke another one. All right.
Oh, God. Hey, you're calling me out, man. They can't even see the video.
Joe, I'm looking at this list, man. We got a lot of people mentioned multiple times. When I was going through reading them, were you keeping track, or were you too busy smoking up to get high?
I was not necessarily keeping track, but I mean, I could tell you just from what memory I do have, I feel like Hogan was on there a bunch of times, a lot of times unwillingly.
Yeah.
Ric Flair made a ton of lists. The Rock made a lot of lists. Dusty, I didn't even have on my list, but I should have had him on there. Superstar Billy Graham made a surprising number of lists. Was it more than 2?
Yeah, I think it was 3, but Dusty's on this list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So let's put Dusty in the next round. I mean, Ric Flair's got to go in the next round. And who do you want to split it between? Maybe a debate between Michaels and
Rock and Hogan.
Rock and Hogan, perfect.
It's gotta be. Yeah, it's gotta be. And
this is good.
Wow,
this is going to be pretty easy.
Yeah, this normally, like we say, like we're arguing about who's going to lose, but any of these guys could win, really.
Yeah, and especially, I think that The Rock's got to go over Hogan. If not, for, like, the way I think about it is, like, the racist statements aside, I think that the fact that Rock got into Hollywood, made arguably better movies, and was able to transition into a career like that, almost has to put his charisma over the top. He came back to WrestleMania just to shoot a flamethrower off. That's a real thing.
You're kind of taking the words out of my mouth. I was going to say Hogan had the prolonged top pro wrestling career where it's charismatic, but Rock was so charismatic, he basically became bigger in pro wrestling. His charisma has carried him on to that next level. So, yeah, I think Rock's got to go over Hogan. And then we got a hell of a final three here.
Yeah, and I think this might be the first time in a while that the third person in, or like the last person in, isn't the first person bounced. Because, I mean, you got Dusty, Ric Flair, and The Rock. Honestly, to me, it's between Dusty and The Rock.
Damn, Joe, you're fucking taking the words out of my mouth. I want to argue a bit, but that's what I'm going to go with, because even though as much as I love Rick, at the end of the day, I just think there was something more charismatic about Dusty. Recently, they covered, it was Rick or Dusty, on the Jim Ross podcast, and they talked about how Jim Crockett had Dusty put Stardust on the plane, and Jim Crockett didn't stop him. And, you know, that probably didn't make Ric Flair feel too good, because at the end of the day, Jim Crockett, even though we had the title on Flair, he's basically telling you, but Dusty's our guy. He's our number one.
Yep.
So that's how I'm kind of like, it's really so close. I'm sure AJ might disagree, but at the end of the day, I'm going to move Dusty that final round, and it's Dusty and The Rock.
And think about, too, the fact that Dusty's charisma might have helped him as a teacher going forward, because he inspired like a whole nother generation.
He did.
And in it, like, I think part of what he taught them was charisma, or kind of how to find their character. You know, I believe I've heard Sasha Banks say it in interviews. I'm sure anybody that came through NXT felt like the brush of Dusty.
Here's the thing. I think The Rock, we said, okay, he's so charismatic. He went to that next level with the movies, right?
Yeah.
But let's look at The Rock, all right? Pretty handsome guy, all right? I'm a straight heterosexual male. Nothing wrong with that. But Rock is a handsome-looking man.
Hey, he's
the kind of guy you would put in movies. Dusty is damn sure not. Yeah. However, Dusty's so charismatic that despite his look, he had people all over him, all the fans. You can even go back to the old interviews you get. They put like the mic in the crowd in Florida wrestling, and girls are like, "I want to see Dusty Rhodes. He's a hunk." Like, no, he's not, bitch. But I respect the fact that Dusty was able to get that far over. So to me, given his look and how charismatic he was, I'm going to go with Dusty. But hey, man, you can make the argument. It's close.
It's tough because the blacks, Jesus Christ, The Rock is half black and half Samoan. And I mean, shit, even Nia Jax at her size is quite fetching. So that is a combination you can't deny. Yeah. But like you said, Dusty is taking he's a chubby guy. He's got a lisp. But
my
he's
belly's a little bit round. My hiney's a little bit big, but I'm bad, and they know it.
Yeah, and I mean, just his charisma almost like won anybody over. So I honestly think that Dusty's got to take it this week.
Yeah, he was our best interview guy too. I remember I argued for that and fought for him to come with me, and I'm winning it. So goddamn it. The one thing you know about the Working Fans podcast, actually, Joe, I don't know if you remember this, but I'm just going to say this too. What my first idea when we were brainstorming for this, and obviously it was probably going to be plagiarism, we couldn't get away with it, I wanted to call this the Common Man podcast. So I am a fucking mark for Dusty anyway, so it is what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody that's talked to us thinks it's the Working Man's podcast. We've had more than a couple audio drops that we've either haven't used or had to somehow just like let it go because they're too big a guest. But it's all Dusty influenced, and that's something that his level of charisma will do. But Dave, you hear the music. You know what time it is. Guys,
time to get funky like a monkey, baby. We out.
Guys, thank you for listening to the 531 here on YouTube this week. If you like what you hear, you can always find us on Anchor FM, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and on the Apple Podcast where you can subscribe and also give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate you listening. We want your feedback, 531, and if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, we also want you to let us know, and let us know what your 531 would be. Come up with a top 5 and let us know, and we'll tell you why you're wrong. And in order for us to do that, please contact us on Twitter. We're at Fans Working. Facebook page, Working Fans Wrestling Pod. Email workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. It's very important that you actually contact us on these platforms because we want this to be your interactive place to talk wrestling.